So we are going to be doing a DraftKings first look for Week 7 of the NFL season. Crazy that it's almost November here. 1/3 of the season in the books, and we have 12 more weeks of football to go. So very, very excited. And this is the first time I'm going to be taking a look at these price tags. So without further ado, let's start off at quarterback, where we have Kyler Murray and Patrick Mahomes battling it out for that top spot. Now we saw Patrick Mahomes have a higher price tag on FanDuel yesterday. The main thing here that sticks out to me like a sore thumb is that Lamar Jackson is $1,000 cheaper than Mahomes and $1,100 cheaper than Kyler Murray this week. Now, Kyler and Lamar on FanDuel were very, very close in price, and Mahomes was higher than them by a couple hundred. Now, this just tells me that I think people are going to gravitate towards playing Lamar Jackson in cash. I think that the matchup is great for him. I still don't believe necessarily in the Baltimore Ravens defense, although they played very well against the Chargers on Sunday. You got a lot of good quarterbacks in a lot of great spots. Kyler Murray against Houston is obviously a no-brainer streaming play for fantasy. For DraftKings, though, it's a little bit tough. You know, it's a high price tag. And Kyler Murray, how much is he actually going to have to do in this spot? I'm not sure. This is definitely a much better matchup than what the Jaguars game was. So comparing it to that, I don't really know if that's worth it. Not throwing for 300 yards over the last 3 weeks is certainly interesting for Murray. He didn't really have to against the Rams or the Cleveland Browns, and the San Francisco game was very strange. So the one thing that's missing from Kyler this year is the rushing upside. He's had it in a few games, specifically the first 2 games of the season, but the last 2 games, 7 attempts for 6 yards, 7 attempts, only got 1 yard out of that. So you kind of expect more from Murray. Right now, I think he's a fine option for tournaments. Cash games, though, you know, it's good. I'm not kicking him out of the cash game pool by any means. But if you want on DraftKings specifically, you can save $1,000 or $1,100 and get to Lamar Jackson. Patrick Mahomes
Hey,
put up.
Derek, real quick.
Go ahead.
Nick ruled out for Thursday's game.
Nick Chubb got ruled out.
Yep, officially ruled out.
Oh, all right. Well, that makes more sense to why John Kelly got upgraded. So thank you for that, sir. I appreciate that. We'll touch on that on Thursday, guys. But that makes the Browns game very, much more interesting from a pricing perspective because I'm sure salaries are already out for that game, and that's gonna definitely get some chalk players in very good spots at low price tags. Back to Patrick Mahomes, threw for almost 400 yards against Washington. No surprise, really. The thing that surprises me is that he's leading the league in interceptions right now with 8, which that is surprising. Does he turn it around? He will. So I think that he's in a great spot here against Tennessee. Despite all the Bills' struggles, I shouldn't say struggles on offense, but they just could not convert in the red zone on last night's game on Monday night. So I think that coming into this game, Mike Vrabel is going to game plan for the same approach as they did last night against Buffalo, where they're going to allow teams to either run the ball on them or they're going to let them get the open shallow throws and shallow reads. They're going to give them a little bit more space there. Play the too high zone or maybe even too high man-to-man in some cases. But Patrick Mahomes and this Chiefs offense, they're going to try to have the big play, and I'm interested to see if that's going to work against Tennessee. It should, because Tennessee only has like 3 healthy cornerbacks. We'll see what their health status is later on in the week. But right now, I think that my 2 cash game options here are Patrick Mahomes if you have the extra money, and then Lamar Jackson sitting at 7,400. Those are two very enticing options up top. Aaron Rodgers against Washington is in play for tournaments. Again, I don't think he's a cash game play where I'd much rather just take Lamar Jackson $100 below him or even go up a little bit more to Patrick Mahomes for $900 more. Tom Brady in play for tournaments as well. That offense is just not going to stop producing, so I think he's in play at 7,700, but he's more of a GPP option for me. Stafford against Detroit, we talked about the spot yesterday. I think that Stafford could, he could ball out a little bit here against Detroit, against his old team. The main thing here is that this game's at home. it seems like a spot where the Rams are going to put up the same amount of points that they put up in Week 6 against the New York Giants. So Stafford for me is in play for tournaments. Obviously, there's no rushing upside here for Stafford, but I do think that it's a great spot for the offense, and I would expect him to be a popular stack with Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods in tournaments, if not like even maybe a Deshaun Jackson flyer, who we'll talk about here in a little bit. Jalen Hurts against Las Vegas. Hurts, still don't really know what to do with this guy necessarily. I still think that his floor is tremendous. So, like, look at this really quick, guys. 12 for 26 against Tampa. Obviously, he struggled, but the rushing upside here is immense. It's insane. He's rushing at a clip of around 8 to 10 attempts a game, which I think is his floor, honestly, at this point of the season. So I think that he is always in play for tournaments. The cash game upside is there. The floor for him right now on the season sits at 21, and he really hasn't necessarily balled out outside of this game against Kansas City. You can include Dallas in there a little bit, but a lot of that came from garbage time. Vegas' defense kind of looked a little bit better last week against the Broncos, but Philly going into Vegas is always, it's a tough place to play. I think Jalen will be just fine, and he presents some awesome tournament upside at 6,900. All right, Tannehill looked pretty pedestrian last night, made a few mistakes early on in the game. Definitely was sheltered by the massive Derrick Henry performance. Just don't know necessarily if the ceiling is there right now for Tannehill. The ceiling being 23 points right now. Could this be a spot where Derrick Henry's schemed out? Possibly, but again, we tried to plan for that last night and it didn't really work out in our favor. So I think that for right now, Tannehill is in play for tournaments, but I think we have to prioritize Derrick Henry against Kansas City. Again, after last night, I don't really know what this number is, but previous to last night, Derrick Henry had 48 more rushing attempts than the next running back in the NFL. So that just tells me that they're trying to give him as much usage as possible. We saw A.J. Brown come back. We saw Julio play, and both of them, the game definitely turned into an A.J. Brown show, even despite the injury and despite the food poisoning that he had sustained in the last 24 hours. So I think that Tannehill's ceiling comes back into play with those guys, with the defense that is second worst in the league in guarding the opposing quarterback, opposing wide receivers in Kansas City. So I think that we're going to have a little bit of a shootout situation going here. It's just what side do you want to back? So I think that Tannehill is great leverage off of a popular Derrick Henry. Julio re-aggravated the hammy. Yeah, I mean, it's going to be a thing all season, right? The one thing that Julio is known for is re-aggravating things, but still finding a way to play towards the end of the week. So I expect him to be limited or DNP all week and then finally playing on Sunday. Hopefully it's not too bad for Julio. Okay, like I mentioned yesterday, there aren't too many quarterbacks underneath Tannehill that we really like on FanDuel. DraftKings, we'll see if we fall into a spot here. Maybe you can consider Tua at 5-5. I mean, he came back from the injury, and I know it was against Jacksonville, but he threw the ball 47 times for over 300 yards. And we'll see if we get Devontae Parker back. But he obviously had a nice connection with Jalen Waddle in this offense. I mean, Tua against the Atlanta Falcons seems like a pretty juicy spot for tournaments. However, I don't think I can go here in cash games. Down the list here, I'm not playing Justin Fields against Tampa. That's a nightmare of a matchup. We'll see what Daniel Jones' status is. Mac Jones, not really sold on this guy for tournaments. In cash games, neither. I mean, I don't know. He just has not hit 20 DraftKings points yet. This could be a spot where he does it. He did play this Jets team a few weeks ago, but it was mostly a ground game show. A very, very slow, slogging AFC East matchup that we're going to see here once again. So not on Mac Jones for anything, really. Outside of that, I'm not really interested in much. So I'll probably move on to running back here. But, I mean, Tua is interesting a little bit. And then really it's kind of the top guys for me. So if I had to pick right now who my cash game quarterback would be, I would be having a discussion between Patrick Mahomes and Lamar Jackson at 7,400. Running back, we have Derrick Henry. Did not see his price tag until right now. He is 9,200. Obviously, a beneficiary of the Monday night salary performance here. 38 DraftKings points in yesterday's game. They probably could have adjusted it to over 10K if they wanted to. However, they only adjusted it 200 after the Jacksonville destruction game that he had. Henry now has 7 touchdowns in the past 3 games. Going to be a spot where he, as much as we talked about his usage yesterday, or his usage overall this season on every single podcast, every single First Look show, he only got 22 touches last night. And he was very efficient with those touches. Obviously got that super long touchdown run. But he would have gotten over 100 yards, I think, regardless. So he's going to be a guy that just has one of the safest workloads in the league and has one of the safest goal line approaches as well. You even throw in the fact that he kind of had a touchdown vultured from him. I know Ryan Tannehill sometimes takes those, so it's not surprising to me. But you could have easily seen Derrick Henry get in the end zone 4 times yesterday. And then if that game goes to overtime, who knows what would have happened. So Derrick Henry, fully in play. He's a smash lock and load on DraftKings at 9,200. I'd be curious to see if anybody has an issue with that play. So I'm interested to see what people think about it over the course of the week. But for me, it's a smash spot home run. The next appropriate, I don't think McCaffrey's playing. Aaron Jones against Washington's a good matchup. At 7,500, Saquon, I think he's closer to doubtful here. So the next guy that's even in consideration, who is a home run play, is Darrell Henderson at 6,600. The matchup against Detroit is the best on paper on the slate. He just had a game where he had 23 touches. Even got involved in the passing game, 23 touches. Got involved in the passing game, excellent catch. Maybe they start to use him more after he showed that upside there. Anyway, regardless, he's going to be a guy that has 20-plus touches on the ground. The Rams have a great game script here. I haven't seen the odds, but I'm pretty sure they're probably, I would guess that they're like minus 10 or minus 11 home favorites in this spot. So Henderson, home favorite running back, gets some work in the pass game. Can't rely on it too much. Does have the huge touchdown upside and should get 20 to 25 touches. So I think that Henderson is in a fantastic spot where his price tag only increased by $600. So, I think that Henry and Henderson both are in smash spots. Let's talk about Joe Mixon here because it was reported that he was close to 100% healthy after the game and coming into week 7 against Baltimore. We've seen teams run on Baltimore this season. They're still a little bit banged up overall on the defensive end. So if Joe Mixon is in a spot where he's going to get around 20 to 25 touches, I still think I side with Darrell Henderson pretty easily in cash games, but in tournaments, this could be a great pivot off of a chalky Henderson. I think that both of them are in great spots. You could even play both if you wanted to in cash. Joe Mixon should be one of the safer workload backs, especially if Samaje Perine continues to miss due to COVID. Fournette's an interesting piece. I think the Tampa Bay offense is going to continue to crush Chicago. While they've been decent at limiting the run, they're not going to stop this offense. So I know that Chicago beat them last year. I know that happened. But I think that Leonard Fournette's role is one of the safer ones in the NFL right now. There's 2 capable backs behind him, but they continue to give Fournette the ball. The matchup the last 2 weeks has been very, very easy for Fournette. This one's a little bit tougher, but he does have the upside of 2+ touchdowns, has the upside in the backfield. The Gio Bernard, experiment really hasn't panned out for Tampa. It did for a little bit, but now since Bernard's been out and has come back, they've given Fournette a ton of work in the passing game, and he's been very, very efficient with that. Seems to be averaging anywhere in the range of 4 to 6 targets. Has completed a bunch of those, like an 85% catch rate, and then the yards after the catch. It's great. I think that there's so much attention drawn on these receivers that this opens up things for Fournette. If Brady can't find his first 2 reads, just dumps it off to him and gets first downs and 4 or 5 times a game. It's huge for this offense. So Leonard Fournette, fully in play here. He's probably going to be one of the lower owned guys in this range. I would think that people would play Mixon and Henderson over him, but Fournette represents a great tournament pivot. And we'll see how news shakes out for the rest of the week because that could be a really, really sneaky play. I also think that Cordero Patterson's probably heavier owned than Leonard Fournette. Patterson, while dual eligible on FanDuel, is not catching dual eligibility on DraftKings right now, which is kind of weird, seeing as he's been used in both the run game and the passing game. Had 21 touches last week against the Jets in London. Obviously, did not score a touchdown for the first time in a while, but he's still going to be used as that guy, as that Swiss Army knife in this offense. The one thing that is a little bit concerning, and this actually could bump him up a little bit, is that Calvin Ridley's coming back. He was not playing for this team when they went to London. So Calvin Ridley coming back to practice should be good to go for Miami. The one thing that is interesting to me is that Miami's run defense is atrocious. So I think that both Cordero Patterson and Mike Davis, who I'm sure we'll see here in a little bit, are both in play for tournaments. I feel like I still like Mixon and Henderson a little bit more, and obviously I like Henry the most. So I don't know. Cordero Patterson's price is definitely good for this spot, though. I'm not going to lie. It's just kind of weird that we're talking about him out of all people. All right, Josh Jacobs. Wish that he was getting more touches. 16 is an upgrade from what he was getting. Got the touchdown. He's never really involved in the passing game, even though he has been in weeks 4 and 5, which is kind of weird. So Josh Jacobs, a good tournament play, not a smash spot, but a solid tournament play in a game that I expect to be very close, possibly with Vegas having a lead in it. Peyton Barber not being there, I don't know. It's more of he's kind of more guaranteed to get 15 touches, but again, this Raiders offense is very strange. So Chuba Hubbard got in the end zone last week early and then kind of tailed off for the rest of the game as that was a shootout scenario. I really wish that he got more targets in that game, especially when given the fact that this game was as close as it was. He's in a really good spot here against the New York Giants. I do believe that Carolina should have a pretty strong hold on the game here with the time of possession, with just having a lead in general. So if Chuba gets in the range of 20 plus touches again, like he had in week 5, I think that it's a solid option to go to. 6,100 seems like a price point that's going to go a little bit under the radar and could be a very, very good tournament play. So the trend that I'm seeing here, and I've said this like 3 times in a row now, is that we do have a couple really, really safe cash game spots in Darrell Henderson, in Joe Mixon, in Derrick Henry, maybe even in Leonard Fournette, and there's these awesome tournament pivots that you can consider. Like Leonard Fournette falls in both categories. Patterson, Mike Davis, who we'll talk about here in a little bit, Josh Jacobs, Chuba Hubbard. I'm not playing DeAndre Swift against the Rams. I know that DeAndre Swift leads the Lions in target share, but it just is an ugly, ugly spot, especially playing in LA at SoFi. I mean, I don't know how Detroit even tries to do anything in this game. Gibson against the Packers rush defense, who has a lot of guys on the injury report this week. Could be an interesting spot. I know he's currently dealing with the shin as well as another leg injury there. Darrell Williams' price got jumped up to 5,800 against Tennessee. Not the worst option in the world, but I would prefer guys that are, I would much rather pay like $600 more to get to a guy like Joe Mixon, or 1,000 to get, or 800 to get to Darrell Henderson. Okay, Damien Harris against New York is certainly interesting at 5,700. We'll see what happens with this Arizona situation, but I think that James Conner presents a very interesting boomer bust high GPP upside here. The touchdowns need to go his way, so you need to get one of these kind of weeks where he plays Jacksonville or LA and gets in the end zone twice for this to pay off. But I do think that he could get in the end zone here against Houston. Need to monitor the status of Chase Edmonds. I know he came into the week a little bit banged up, so right now he doesn't have an injury designation, but I think that could pop up on the injury report this week. We'll keep an eye on what happens with the Bears running backs, but honestly, we're not playing any of them against Tampa, so that's kind of a wash for me. So Devontae Booker against Carolina, that's a shaky play. A lot of tournament guys, a lot of tournament running backs this week so far, and we haven't even gotten through all of them yet. Mike Davis, 5,200. This could be a guy where I could see some leverage off of a guy like Cordero Patterson, who could be popular in tournaments against Miami. Mike Davis, his role is just so weird this year. He's going to get double-digit rushing attempts. The past game work is up and down. I wish I could solidify more touches for him, but I think that his ceiling kind of caps out at around 15 to 17. Is that enough to be successful against Miami? I think it is. You really, really hope that he gets that touchdown that's inside the 5-yard line, because they've been doing a lot of sneaky stuff with Cordero Patterson in both the run and pass games. I think that Mike Davis has the option. Like there's potential here for him to break out and have a 20-point game. Okay. Miles Sanders against Las Vegas. I really hope that the rushing attempts are there, but right now I kind of have to side with this being only a GPP play. And then it kind of gets gross as we come down here. Ramondre Stevenson's interesting, but he just doesn't get enough work. Again, keeping an eye on Samaje Perine is very important. Also, keeping an eye on Jeremy McNichols and what happens to the Tennessee backs is very important. We saw this last night. McNichols left warm-ups, came back in after getting taped up, then left the game again during the first half. So they have some running backs on this Tennessee roster, but obviously it's going to be the Derrick Henry show this week against Kansas City in a game where I expect Kansas City might not blow them out of the water. So we'll see what happens. A.J. Dillon, I talked about this on the FanDuel show yesterday. A.J. Dillon at 4,600 could be an interesting spot. I know that the touches aren't necessarily where we'd like them to be, but they are getting there for A.J. Dillon. Now, it's going to be a couple up and down weeks in terms of and this is not a cash game play whatsoever. I'm just, spitballing and speculating here. As this season progresses, Green Bay is 5-1 right now. They don't have to pound the rock with Aaron Jones 20 plus times a game. That's why they got A.J. Dillon, and that's why they kept him over a guy like Jamal Williams, who they really, really liked on that team. A.J. Dillon, 4,600. We said he didn't have much receiving upside, but look at Week 5 against Cincinnati. That could be a thing that happens 2 or 3 times in the season, so don't be overly bullish on that. But Dillon could step into a role, whereas at the beginning of the year, I kind of thought that Aaron Jones was going to have this 75-25 domination workhorse load kind of thing, and that we've seen that a few times this year. But as the season progresses, this could be a spot where A.J. Dillon starts to get more like 35 to 40% of the work. So if that happens, you got to pick and choose your spots, but I think that A.J. Dillon could be a tournament flyer for you if you have any interest in that. Now, as this running back position goes down, I'm not really interested in much here. Nah. I'm going to stay away from the rest of it. That's as far down as I would go. So, moral of the story here is that there's 3 to 5 clear-cut cash options, and then there are extreme pivots off of those in the mid 6K range. This is a really, really juicy range here. 6,000 to 6,500 is awesome. So let's move on. Let's talk about wide receivers here. Davante Adams, after a stinker of a performance last week, is only $100 cheaper than he was in Week 6. I'm not concerned about the targets for Adams last week. Obviously, I would have liked to have had more, but this is just going to happen every so often where Rodgers is just going to find a way to get other people the ball. He was spreading it out quite a bit. Lazard got a touchdown. Aaron ran one in himself, and then there's going to be weeks where they won't have to rely on Davante Adams all the time. So the target share is still an insane clip of 36%, which I believe is the league lead right now. Maybe Cooper Kupp edged him out last week and those numbers are flip-flopped, but Davante Adams is going to have a top 3 target percentage, target share over the course of this NFL season. In a spot where they may not have to necessarily use him too much, I do think that I'm on the fence with him being a guy that I'm going all in on. I think he's obviously going to be in cash game consideration every single week, but does Green Bay have to rely on Davante to get the job done this week? The answer for me is simply no. So we're going to see in spots like against Pittsburgh, against Chicago, games that they have pretty fairly in the bag to an extent. They're not going to need him as much. Games like Detroit was a close game throughout. or in the first half at least. And then, after a 14-14 tie, things really opened up for Green Bay. San Francisco game was close the whole time. Cincinnati game was close the whole time. That's why you see these huge fantasy point performances from Davante Adams. If the games are competitive, he's going to have a monster workload. If they aren't as competitive, it's a little bit more shaky. Still in cash consideration, though. Tyreek Hill against Tennessee is a monster blow-up spot. If I had to choose between one of Tyreek Hill or Davante Adams, it's Tyreek Hill this week. And it's not going to happen very often. I think this is the first time that it's happened for me where I've sided on I've been on the Tyreek side of things. Double-digit targets in 3 of the last 3 games. I guess like the quad issue didn't really bother him at all last week. And in a spot where Kansas City, they won last week, so they're in a good spot, but they need to win this game in order for them to kind of turn their season around. Tennessee's coming off a huge win against the Buffalo Bills, and now people are like, after seeing the Bills go down and lose a game, Kansas City is sitting there looking at their chops like, hey, we're still in this, man. Like, we can do this. We just have to be consistent, be us. And I think Tyreek Hill is going to have a field day with the corners that Tennessee has remaining. They lost like 4 corners last night. They lost some key defensive players. This is going to be what I think is going to be a shootout. I don't know if Tennessee can keep up necessarily, but we saw that they kept up with the Bills last night. I think Tyreek Hill has a smash performance. Not saying he has 50-point upside, but it certainly seems like a spot where he has 40 to 50-point upside. Okay. Cooper Kupp against Detroit, another smash spot. Kupp's price is not high enough for this matchup. I don't know. Going to be another great spot where you can play Henderson Kupp in the same lineup and feel really good about it on DraftKings. DeAndre Hopkins against Houston is a very, very good spot. A little bit of a narrative driven there. I think that Hopkins is in play for tournaments. Wouldn't be the first guy I'd go to for cash. I think the narrative is real. However, this game's in Arizona, so we'll see how it goes. Anyway, still in play for tournaments. DJ Moore, super cheap price tag at $7,100 for the role that he's had and the target share that he's had. I know Robbie Anderson had a rough game, but he still caught that touchdown. DJ Moore should have a really, really big bounce back spot here. There's not going to be too many times during the season where he has 13 targets and only completes 5 of them. He was getting a lot of Patrick Peterson, had an amazing catch down the stretch, did DJ Moore. So I'm not concerned about this spot. Lost a fumble. That's not, something that you're going to see every day from him. So I think DJ Moore at 7,100 is a guy that is going to be in line for a nice bounce back spot against the New York Giants at 7,100. Certainly not a bank breaker. I think that, in cash games, you're probably not going to be able to get up to him. But if I had to choose to try to get up to a guy in this range, it would be him, while also trying to get in these top guys like Tyreek Hill. Okay. Terry McLaurin and Calvin Ridley, both in great spots. Green Bay, this opponent ranking is not accurate right now. Green Bay is down several defensive backs, their best safety, their D-line's injured. I think that Washington could move the ball on them, and Terry McLaurin, after what was a very, very rough game on Sunday against the Chiefs, is back now to prove himself again in this spot. Like I said, Packers, Jair Alexander's on the IR. Kevin King has been missing with injuries. You have to rely on guys like Rasul Douglas and Eric Stokes. And while I think Stokes is the truth down the line, he's still a rookie at the end of the day. And McLaurin should be able to eat him alive if they get matched up on each other. Calvin Ridley, same thing. Miami's defense is terrible. I think that as long as Xavier Howard's out for Miami, which he was last week, Calvin Ridley should be able to thrive in this spot. Now we get to some of these other plays that are more GPP-esque. Mike Evans, Antonio Brown, A.J. Brown against Kansas City is very interesting. Robert Woods against Detroit. All these guys are great tournament pivots. I think A.J. Brown is too cheap. He's probably going to come in as one of the chalkier cash game options. I think that you can feel really comfortable playing a guy like A.J. Brown if Julio is as banged up as we think he is to start the week. A.J. Brown showed that his injury was not a problem last night, and he was the go-to guy when Tennessee needed big plays on 4th down. 9 targets, great for him, tied with the most he's seen all season. Should be able to be in line for a great matchup against Kansas City here. You could easily pair up A.J. Brown with Tyreek Hill and have a great ceiling. Especially if you're able to get Patrick Mahomes in there, that's a great way to start a tournament lineup. Jamar Chase against Baltimore, very interesting spot. I shouldn't say he's fallen back to earth because he really hasn't, but he did have a down week a little bit in Jamar Chase's land. 13 points is still, technically value at this price. Obviously, you want guys that have 20-point upside, which he brings to the table. The targets were the lowest that he's had in 3 weeks. I still think that this game should be competitive. I'd be curious to see if they put Marlon Humphrey on Chase or if they put him on T. Higgins. We'll have to find out as the week progresses, but I would assume Jamar Chase will see some Marlon Humphrey this week, which, again, tough matchup, but I'm not necessarily afraid of it too much. Okay, other guys to consider. We'll have to monitor what happens with Julio. Brandon Cooks against Arizona is a great spot. Brandon Cooks, like I said several times this year, he's going to be the only fantasy relevant player on Houston. He's going to most of the time get double-digit targets. Has not found the end zone since week 1 or week 2. So I think touchdown regression is coming for Brandon Cooks. This could be a spot where he gets it. I won't necessarily say this thing is a blowout, but there's a good chance that it is. So in that case, I think Brandon Cooks still has that garbage time upside like we saw last week against Indianapolis. All right. Trying to find any guys we can dumpster dive with here. I mean, Jalen Waddle is very, very, very interesting down here. Sterling Shepard is in play. Marquise Brown's in play. Need to keep an eye on the Giants' receiver health, as that's going to really kind of paint a picture of how this thing's going to go this week. Jacoby Myers against the Jets is interesting. AJ Green against Houston's interesting at 5-1. Allen Robinson. Eventually, one of these times, the Bears' offense is going to click. I would not expect it to be in this spot against Tampa Bay, but with the fact that Richard Sherman's going to be out for a while, Tampa Bay's secondary depth is very, very, very limited. So Allen Robinson, if there was a spot where he could ball out, I think that this could be it. He got 7 targets, went for 53 yards against Green Bay. Obviously, the one thing you're missing from him is just touchdowns. That's all he needs if he's getting 5 to 7 targets is a touchdown. So Allen Robinson at 5-1. Eventually, at some point, he's going to pop off. This could be a spot where he does that in garbage time. All right, we'll see. You have to monitor Devontae Parker's status against Atlanta. That game is, as gross as it sounds on paper, has definite shootout upside. Any Atlanta game has shootout upside. So could easily see Atlanta coming out, getting a lead on Miami, and then Miami having to fight back and throw through the air. Robbie Anderson, interesting buy low spot against the Giants after he scored a touchdown late in that game against Minnesota. Darnell Mooney, same situation as Robinson, did get the touchdown last week, so he paid off at that price tag. Mecole Hardman's a very, very interesting GPP sleeper option if you want to fade Tyreek Hill, which I would not suggest. But Hardman could be a spot where you might, be able to get. And let's just do this for fun. We're gonna build this lineup as we go along, but just the 3 wide receivers that stand out the most to me right now are AJ Brown, and then the 2 Kansas City receivers. Why can't I spell today? All right, A.J. Brown, and let's go with Mecole Hardman. See if there's any other spots that we really like down here in the wide receiver range, like below 4K. We'll see if Russell Gage comes back. He's an interesting spot against Miami. Randall Cobb against Washington's in play. Amon-Ra St. Brown, I know that they don't really have any wide receivers right now that are healthy in Detroit, so St. Brown, Josh's guy, came in last week. Got a lot of targets down the stretch, so it's kind of what he's going to see now. 7 to 8 targets. Maybe the upside is double digits. We'll see how it goes for St. Brown. Not too much more that I'm interested in. I don't think you have to dumpster dive this far. Yeah. I'm not really going to get behind any of these other plays. If something happens where somebody gets hurt or injured and opens up a spot for somebody else, then I'll bring it to your attention later on in the week. You do have Josh Gordon sitting here at 3,200, which is very interesting too. Keep an eye for John Ross. I know he didn't get a target in last week's game, but if Kadarius Toney and if Kenny Galladay and Kadarius Toney miss, that could be an interesting spot for John Ross if he is able to make it and give it a go. All right, that's pretty much it for the wide receivers. So we'll run this route and see what we can do with a game stack of this game. May have to use Tannehill in it, but I want to just see if we can do this and make things work with the rest of our build. It's going to be really hard to do this, but we'll just keep it up here for the time being. Tight end, Travis Kelce is 7,600. Darren Waller 6,700. Kind of feels like a pay down week for tight end once again. Mark Andrews got priced up a little bit after scoring a touchdown again against the LA Chargers. Kyle Pitts against Miami is interesting, but Calvin Ridley's coming back. Hawkinson, not a great matchup. Gronk shouldn't be playing, so don't count on him. Mike Gesicki's an interesting spot, depending on Miami's receiver depth. Dallas Goedert should be able to give it a go, and this is kind of a play where I feel decent in targeting the Vegas linebacking core. We know that Zach Ertz is gone. We know that this is Dallas Goedert's position now. He should be in a spot where he plays. He should run routes on like 95% of snaps, honestly. So Dallas Goedert certainly in play as long as he is clearing the COVID list. Tyler Higbee is an interesting tournament pivot off of a guy like Cooper Kupp or Darrell Henderson. Hunter Henry, not the greatest, obviously, but he does have touchdown upside at a very cheap price tag. Zach Ertz stands out here at 3,900 against Houston. It is yet to be seen what Zach Ertz is going to be able to do, how fast he's going to be integrated into this offense. We know that Cliff Kingsbury wasn't with the team the other day. Didn't seem to matter too much, but I'm interested to see where Ertz fits in. And if he does slide into something, he could be a fantastic tournament option this weekend against Houston. For, as much as like Arizona's burned me, I feel like I could go back to the spot and feel pretty good about it. Ricky Seals-Jones scored a touchdown. His price continues to stay under 4,000. Interesting spot against Green Bay. Green Bay has lost a few cover linebackers, so they might have to rely on Jalen, their newly acquired linebacker, to be able to guard Ricky Seals-Jones. That'll be an interesting matchup to see. Other than that, I'm not really in love with anything. Anthony Ferguson's interesting at 3,100 in a pace-up game. Maybe you can get behind some Cole Kmet. Other than that, though, it's pretty gross all the way around. So I'm going to probably stop there. Yeah, that's it. Okay. On defense, let's see. Rams priced up. Rams are 5,000 on DraftKings. That's actually crazy. And then Buccaneers against Chicago are $1,000 cheaper. You have the Panthers in a really good spot against the New York Giants, who are going to be down a lot of offensive pieces. Patriots, same thing against the Jets. All right, that's fun. The thing that stands out to me right now is the Cardinals against Houston. I know Houston has looked better, but they didn't look very good last week. So I think that you can rely on the Cardinals at 3,100. Let's try to find another team that we can get on, that we can punt a little bit farther down the list on. Texans, no. Detroit, no. Tennessee, not really. Washington, no. Eagles, yeah. There's not much down here either. Tennessee, I guess, if you had to pick one team. But I'm terrified of their secondary depth right now, so I probably won't punt there. I think the best play on paper, honestly, is probably the Cardinals, just given the fact that they should probably be up in this range near the Rams and the Bucks and the Panthers. So I'll go with the Cardinals just for the first look defense. We're going to have to switch out some of these guys just because we can't make this work necessarily. So I will have to get off of something here, and I'll let you know what that is in a second. But just finishing this first look out, I do want some Darrell Henderson. And yeah, things are going to make it a little bit tougher for us this week, apparently. I think we could go with Zach Ertz here. I think we could go with Ferkser. Maybe that's where we go instead of A.J. Brown, just to make things a little bit more doable. Still not the greatest. I think we're going to have to decide between what we want to do with a guy like Tyreek Hill, Patrick Mahomes. It's kind of hard to do those two guys and Derrick Henry, so you might have to pick and choose one of them. And maybe this is an interesting point. It's early, it's Tuesday. I'm just spitballing ideas right now, and I'm not saying that this is what I'm going to do, one thing or another. So can you get behind possibly going with 3 6K running backs on DraftKings and paying for the upside of Tyreek Hill, Patrick Mahomes against Tennessee? I think you can. The other side of this is maybe you go with Lamar Jackson, maybe you get off Tyreek Hill and roster a guy like A.J. Brown with Derrick Henry. There's always options here. I think that Hardman's an excellent option to save money. I think Ferkser's an excellent option to save money. Darrell Henderson's too cheap. Let's go, just for this sake, I'm taking Henry out of the build just to make it work. Doesn't mean I'm going to do it on Sunday. Obviously, he had an amazing performance last night and is way too cheap this week. So what we'll do is we'll put Henderson and Joe Mixon in the build. And then that makes things a little bit easier for us to work around for the rest of our lineups. Let's see. Flex, I would like to get another running back in there. Right now, there's no value necessarily as of Tuesday that stands out too much. James Conner's interesting here, but he's not really a cash game play necessarily. He's definitely in play for tournaments, though. Let's just use Mike Davis. This is gross. I know that. On paper, it's gross, but the matchup is good. And the touches hopefully gets in that range of 15. That's what I think he needs to pay this spot off and get in the end zone. So just for making the sake of the lineup work, I think Mike Davis is in play. And that leaves us with around 4,200 to play. A guy like Lazard is in there. Amon-Ra St. Brown. Randall Cobb. I think that you can look at, yeah, I know I said that this range is gross down here, so let's try to like figure out how we can do this. Darnell Mooney, not really a cash game play. I don't know. I mean, you can play around with your stuff. I think that if you wanted to pivot off of Cardinals to get up to maybe the 5K range of wide receiver, you can certainly do that. Can you do this? No, you cannot do that. Okay. I mean, yeah, some of these guys, there's a lot of injury news in the Giants camp that could shake things out for Sterling Shepard. There's a lot of things that could shake out for the Miami receivers that I'm excited to look at. If Devontae Parker misses, if Preston Williams misses, then it really opens the door for a guy like Jalen Waddle at 5,600. So we'll see how that goes. But yeah, that is pretty much all I have to cover today. Allen Robinson would also fit this build too. So good, decent starting point for tournaments here. I kind of wish I had Derrick Henry in this build, but there could be ways that we could do this as the week progresses. And that is going to be the finale of the Week 7 DraftKings First Look.